For quite a few segments, we've been focusing on the migrants in New York City, and I've been speculating how that's going to play out in the housing market. A couple weeks back, I noticed an article in the news talking about how New York City is reopening their Section 8 housing voucher waiting list for the first time in 15 years. I shared that with you on a stream, and here's the headline to that article here. NYCHA, which is New York City Housing Authority, to reopen Section 8 waiting lists after 15 years. Here's how to apply, and on it goes. The other day, we also talked about the New York City One ID card and how that New York City One ID card will allow any New York City resident to apply for affordable housing. So if you put two and two together there, the New York One ID card, which does not require that you are a citizen to apply for affordable housing, uh, add that on to the fact that New York City is now reopening their Section 8 waiting list. I've long posited that the New York City is under a lot of pressure to remove these people from the migrant shelters before it blows. The violence just overflows. I've shown you the military and the police, as well as the outside security, that they have to put in all of these buildings to make sure that they are at least halfway safe. And so it's my thought that the city cannot afford to maintain this long term, and they're going to push these people out into the housing market and let the private landlords deal with it and more or less wash their hands of this immigrant housing situation. So this more or less disappear the issue. And along came this article here, and I'm going to share this article with you. And the article is here. If you can see this article here, New York City is now offering migrant families up to $4,000 in grants to find their own housing. That's very interesting. Section 8 tenants typically don't get money to move, or if you're waiting on Section 8, typically you don't get money to move or find housing. But here it is that New York City is starting to offer housing, to release some of that pressure that's building up in these migrant shelters. The City Department of Homeless Services has quietly provided 150 migrant families with up to $4,000 each to exit the city shelter system and move into permanent housing, agency officials confirmed to Gothamist. The one-time grants are part of a pilot program dubbed Asylum Moveout Assistance. They've been made available to asylum-seeking families and pregnant women who live at 62 Emergency Department of Homeless Services shelters and have lined up their own permanent housing. Now, I've mentioned it time and time again that Section 8 has many loopholes. One of the loopholes is, surrounding children, families, or if you're homeless. These people are all technically homeless, and if they are pregnant, that will move them directly to the front of the list. And add into the fact that they have money and they're ready to go, ready to move immediately, these people are going to be the prime pickings for Section 8 voucher holders, Section 8 voucher landlords. The initiative was launched in December and is modeled on a similar pre-existing city grant program that provides up to $4,000 called one-shot deals for residents of city shelters to pay for moving costs. So as you see here, money and the template for programs that were designed for city residents, American citizens, the template is now being copied and money is now being allocated for migrants. Now, all the people that want to do these mental gymnastics and say, well, it's different bucket of money, so on and so forth, all the money that we're spending on migrants could be spent on these homeless American citizens and help get them out of homeless shelters and pay for their moving costs. But we're now adding migrants into the mix, and they're getting $4,000. Some asylum seekers may not be eligible for that program due to federal and state restrictions. The Moveout program, launched with scant public notice or attention, represent one of the Adams administration's most novel efforts to reduce the census of migrants in city shelters and help those in the system take the next step in their journey. Eric Adams is a friend to the migrants indeed. The administration has also implemented new limits on shelter stays ranging from 30 to 60 days for most migrants and offered free travel to migrants leaving the city shelter. The city's migrant shelter census has hovered around 65,000 for the last several months, even though the number of new migrants arriving in the city and seeking shelter has declined steeply. The city has accommodated more than 210,000 migrants, mostly asylum seekers, in an influx that began in 2022 and has spent more than $5 billion and an average of $372 per night. I mean, this is coming close to building a soccer or NFL stadium. $5 billion is really amazing numbers here. And the article goes on to say the city continues to use every tool and dollar at its disposal to implement innovative solutions while creating fundamental resettlement supports for recently arrived asylum seekers who may not be eligible for most federal and state-funded rehousing assistance. Wow, very interesting. We look forward to supporting even more households as we assess the successes of this pilot and feasibility of scaling up and expanding access to this form of assistance. The grants are paid for with leftover funds from existing budgeted Department of Homeless Services contracts with nonprofit shelter operators. So let me see if I can distill that a little. The grants are paid for with leftover funds from existing budgeted Department of Homeless Services contracts with nonprofit shelter operators. Now, typically, the government doesn't leave over any money from one year to the next. They go on a mass spending spree toward the end of the fiscal year so as to justify increasing their budget. But here we have leftover funds that are being spent on migrants that aren't being spent on American citizens, which means that these leftover funds, in theory, are being held back from American citizens to spend on these migrants. Kind of interesting. Migrant families who line up housing can receive one-time grants of up to $4,000 to help pay for moving expenses, security deposit, first and last month's rent, and other household supplies. No checks and balances here. Families receive up to $1,000 gift cards for necessary household items. And moving companies, landlord, and other merchants are paid directly. Interesting. Anything that increases the city's flexibility to provide people with whatever they're saying they need would be a benefit to everyone. So let me repeat that again, if I can find it. And he says it. Anything that increases the city's flexibility to provide people with what they're saying they need would be a benefit to everyone. So if the migrants demand it and we give it, then that is a benefit to everyone, as long as they say they need it here. This is your government at work, people. Recipients are required to document their expenses. That'll be easy to do. And parents with work permits are prioritized. Since the awards are one-time grants, those who return to city shelters are not eligible to receive second grants. How will you determine who's who? Anyway, so there's more and more of this. They're prepaid debit cards, buying food, baby supplies, on and on it goes. But as I told you, as I predicted, the Section 8 vouchers being reopened after 15 years. And now you add on this strong inducement to get the migrants to move out of the shelters by being offered $4,000. And you're going to see pressure being added to the housing market. And I think that the lower class people that are already finding it hard to find housing in New York City and DC and all these other places where they're going to roll these type of schemes out, you're going to find the noose gets a little tighter for the people looking for housing in these inner cities as they start to shift their focus to the migrants. Well, again, this is just another installment of where I think things are going to go with the migrants and providing housing. Again, it seems to be that the cities are going to roll them right to the front of the line on the Section 8 vouchers and going to pay them again, $4,000 and give them prepaid cards for moving expenses to move out of the shelters. And I more or less predicted that to start with. Once again, against a short stream, feel free to add any comments in the chat here. And if you're interested and you want to hear more about this, we have other streams discussing the migrants situation and the effects on rents, and as well as the crime that we're seeing in Chicago and Aurora, Colorado. Once again, thanks for watching here.